All right, thanks everyone. We'll keep going so we can get to drinks on time. Carl's got this beautiful spiel here around that he's asked me to read out specifically, but I'm not going to. But what I will say is, Carl Rigoni. Carl owns a company called SixSix, and there's a story about how he named the company. I'll let him tell that. But SixSix are our partners around our product team. So we outsource the product team. They're embedded in the UbiPark model. Strategically, we work with Carl, Peter, Eamon and Paul across the design of our products and the product roadmap. They've helped us strategically restructure our business and the org structure. And I'll let Carl sort of talk a little bit more about that. But Justin, who's our head of product, Richard, and now Patrick, are part of the SixSix team that are embedded in the UbiPark model. And it's something we're really proud of. But we do that with Simon in the digital marketing space. But it's areas that we're weak in, that we've got experts in their field to come in and actually help us pull that part of it together. And it'll allow us, there's a bit of a strategy to bring them into the team properly as we grow and we sort of mature as a business. But I'll let Carl come and have a bit of a chat around what he does. I'll leave over to you, mate.
Thank you. Morning. So I'm going to stand down here because I'm a little bit taller. I don't like standing up there. And yes, 6'6" is my height. We couldn't figure out what to name the company, so we thought, fuck it, we'll call it 6'6". So that's how we got there. A couple of months ago, probably about 6 months ago, there was a journalist in the AFR, and she wrote an article about how product managers were dead. And I read the article and I was infuriated because I thought, what is such a narrow-minded view? So it got me thinking, and I thought, how could I combat this? And I wrote an article for LinkedIn, which I published, and I also sent to that journalist at the AFR about how product managers do a hell of a lot more than what she was articulating. And she was basically saying that product managers were going to turn into engineers and designers, and you're going to have this unicorn of a person. And I come from a product management background. I grew up inside Telstra, Australia Post and News Limited. I ran all of product for Census when the Yellow Pages was a thing. For those of us that can remember that, that was a $2 billion company, $2 billion revenue. In 2006, we were valued at $13 billion. They sold it in 2014 for $486 million, and today it no longer exists. But along that journey, a lot of people in Melbourne in particular learnt about product management. So when I saw this article, I was infuriated, and I wrote this article about how product managers need to innovate through people, and we have to work through people. And it got me thinking about all of the experiences that I've had on how do you innovate through people. And it's not just about building high-performing teams and all of that stuff. Whilst that's all important, I didn't want to take that spin, so I wrote this article on how do you navigate corporate politics to innovate. And people used to say to me at Australia Post, what's the onboarding process to start at Australia Post? And I used to say, watch all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. Because all of that stuff that they teach you about understanding alliances and power bases and all the bullshit that you have to avoid getting shot on a cubicle by a little short guy with a crossbow is really real in corporate, right? And it also translates to startup. So I wrote the article from that perspective. So this is a slight different perspective, my perhaps warped perspective on how you get shit done in an organisation, whether it's big or small. So you need to understand when you're innovating, and in particular innovation is such a buzzword, right? But you have to understand how to get stuff done, how to work through others, and you need to understand how they're motivated and how they operate, whether the company's big or small. And so you need to understand that in a framework. And so I built a framework like all good product managers do. We need some sort of framework to operate in. My fonts have gone a bit weird on the screen, but basically there's sort of 8 things that I broke down in my own mind and my own learnings on. And this is sort of, I'm showing my age, but I've been in this space for now 25 years. What did I learn? I got taught by some of the best. My mentors, I worked for a couple of layers, or 1 layer down from David Thodey as the CEO of Telstra. I worked for Ahmed Fahua. I learned and understood how they got things done, how they innovated through people. And so I broke that down into this framework. It's important to note that my perspective today is coming from probably a digital product background, and UbiPark obviously is a digital product. So you'll see it from my perspective from that level, but understand that you can apply the same framework, doesn't matter who you are in the organisation and what you do. In our world, a typical team looks like that. The product manager is at the centre. Am I biased? Yes, I think I'm at the centre of the universe. That's what my wife would say anyway. But around us are a whole team, and that team there, a very similar team to what they've got at Ubi Park actually. You've got a product manager, you've got the dev leads, you've got the testers, you've got the UX leads, the BAs, and so forth and so on, and I am typically in that group. But then that circle emanates out, and so you start to look at the areas that you have to influence: marketing, security, legals. You've got to interact with all of these people. They've all got their own agendas and the way they operate. And then more broadly, you've got your boards, your steercos, and we're all familiar with this at some sort of level. You have to actually influence all of these people to get stuff done. Any one of those people can be a blocker, they can derail you, or you can stand on a landmine and blow your leg off. And that happens a lot. So one of the first things that I broke down was you have to understand power bases. And what does that mean? When you walk into an organisation, whether you like it or not, politics exists. When there's more than 3 people in an organisation, there are politics, and the way they interact is important to understand. Therefore, you're going to have power bases inside an organisation which you need to influence to get stuff done. In particular, in an innovation space where you're introducing new things to the organisation. Organisations don't like new things. It's like introducing a foreign object into your body. It tries to reject it, even if it's a good thing for you, right? And so understanding where power bases sit is so critical and so important. If you get it wrong, you do blow a leg off. If you piss off the wrong person, or you take a misstep, or you're in a meeting and you undermine the person that holds the balance of power on your product, then it doesn't work out necessarily well for you, right? And so the first thing that we teach, and this, we're actually turning this presentation into a course, a training course, because there's a real strong need in market. They don't teach you this stuff at uni. And so we're seeing a lot of it as we're starting to bring people into the workforce, that they're not understanding a lot of these things. Simple things like understanding who holds the balance of power. Who allows you to hire and fire? Is it the CFO? Is it the CEO? Do you need to influence them or not? Do they hold the balance of power? So it's really important that you understand that, and then you then understand also who moves around those people that hold the balance of power and how you can lend their ear to get influence done that way. So it seems a bit covert and a bit dirty, and perhaps it is, but it's the reality of the world in which we live. So if you want to get shit done, you've got to understand this stuff. And so when we're trying to build products or we're trying to innovate, we need to understand what or who holds the purse strings, what is motivating that person, how much power do they have over my product, over my portfolio, over my job, over my team, over my ability to hire. And you'll see a Game of Thrones theme come out here just for fun. So understanding alliances. Who is going to advocate for you? I met a guy called John Burgess, and he started a company called Quam. And it's a bit of a weird company, and I couldn't fully understand what it was until he sort of sat down and said, Carl, I thought it was a networking company. And everyone, if I said to the group here today, have a think about all the people that you know that would support you. You think about the network that you've built through your careers. But if I said to you, have a think about somebody that would stand up for you and defend you or your product or your cause when you're not in the room, how many people would do it? If you took a mental note, how many people would do it? So just quickly, if you think about it, if you're not in the room and you're back at the office and you're not there and you're being undermined or challenged, or your product or your portfolio or whatever it is that you do for a living is being challenged, hands up if you've got more than 5 people that would stand up for you when you're not in the room. So I've got 1 person, 2 maybe, 3. So what about 3 people? 2? Normally sits, when I ask this question, it normally sits around 1 or 2 people are willing to stand up for me when I'm not in the room. And so building alliances is incredibly important. And just think about, it's not who you know, it's about who's going to defend you or your portfolio, your cause, when you're not in the room. And so that's really important. And the other thing is understanding, as part of this overall alliances, we hate rumours, we hate the rumour mill, we hate conversations at the water cooler, even if there are water coolers left anymore in buildings. But understanding how information passes through an organisation and how you can influence that back channel, those informal channels, also becomes incredibly important as you start to develop these alliances. So you need to be aware of this stuff. Again, it's dirty, feels yuck, but unfortunately it happens. And so better to understand it and influence it than not. Again, then we also then need to understand when we're trying to innovate, when we're trying to build products, when we're trying to get stuff done, what are the motivations of the key people in the organisation that I need to influence? What's motivating them? So, as an example, I knew what Ahmed's motivations were when I was at Australia Post. I knew it intimately. And so when we presented something, we presented it with those motivations and his core drivers always at the forefront of what we were doing. He happened to like that as well, right? Because obviously we're thinking about him and his cause. Again, whether you like it or not, you need to understand that. So as product managers, we need to understand what are the motivations of the people that we need to influence. If you're in a dev team or a digital team and you're building a digital product, the motivational factors of the delivery lead are going to be different than the UX lead or the legal lead. They have different drivers, they think differently, they behave differently, they have different intrinsic motivation behind what they do. And so you need to understand that so that you can understand how to influence that. And so, again, understanding how you can do that is really, really important. Diplomacy is another art that we need to learn. Often we don't listen enough and understand and empathise and being diplomatic in a particular situation. If we've got a particular view, we may push it too hard. If we've got a particular stance, we may not be willing to bend. We sometimes don't listen enough, in particular in a confrontational situation. When we're trying to get something done, and in particular, I come back to innovation, because innovation can be so challenging because you're sometimes questioning the status quo and the way things are done, is that trying to find the way to change the way people think, the way they behave, the way they view your portfolios becomes incredibly important. And so active listening and being empathetic to that cause or to their cause and understanding their points of view becomes really, really important. This is an interesting one. A lot of us in the digital space, when we're building a digital product or any product for that matter, we have to prioritise features, as an example. Whoever's been in a feature prioritisation session and you've got someone there that wants one particular feature and someone else wants another particular feature and you get a massive clash. Understanding when to hold firm and when to bend becomes incredibly important, not just in the product space, but in any space in our corporate lives or in our business lives, because we need to understand how to hold firm when we need to, and then also understand when we need to yield. Most people don't understand when to yield. To get something done, sometimes you need to yield. To drive innovation, sometimes you need to yield. What is it they say? You're not going to win, you might not win the battle, but you'll win the war, right? So you've got to understand these subtle soft skills, as it will, to making sure that you can get your job done. You also need to be good at your job. So a lot of this assumes that a lot of these soft skills assume that you're good at what you do, whether you're a good product manager, a dev lead, whatever you do for a living, you're good at it. But what you also need to what you can also do is influence through being great. So people respect people that are good. And it doesn't always work out that way. You've got to do the other stuff as well. You can't just be great and shoot at the other stuff, right? Because then you get seen as a bit of an egotistical maniac and you think you know everything, and just because you're good at your job, all that sort of stuff. But you still have to be good at what you do, and if you are good at what you do, people respect that. And so I've often been in organisations where the CEO or the chairman will turn to the expert because they're good at what they do and they hold that level of respect, and therefore they allow you to get things done. And in product innovation inside an organisation, you need to be able to know how to be good at what you do and also know who else is good at what they do. This is more mental mindset, this one. But the reality is, and in particular now, both in our economic environment and the way that we operate at work, the ability to have adaptability and resilience has become more important than ever. We've got so many factors affecting us at the moment, and trying to get stuff done has become potentially harder with the advent of COVID and the different working models, whether you work from home or hybrid, whether we've got a lot of mental challenges at the moment within most organisations, right? We had it before COVID, we've got it more now. But understanding how to deal with that is becoming more critical. And then the other thing too is that this whole fail fast mentality is probably more important than ever. But the ability to deal with the setbacks of failing fast is also more important than ever. Everyone says, oh, you've got to fail fast. If anyone's been in this position where you fail in a large organisation or a small organisation, failure in Australia, we don't view it that great. If you fail once, you're seen as a failure. It's not a learning, right? So how do you deal with that? And so in innovation, we need to understand that, in particular in the Australian culture, we still haven't learned how to deal with fail fast. We say it because it's a buzzword, and it's in the agile books, and it's in all the lean startup books, and all the famous entrepreneurs talk about it. But dealing with failure inside an organisation and constantly failing, you look at Canva, they got knocked back 99 or 100 times before they were successful in their pitch, right? And so in the innovation space, in the product space, building resilience and adaptability to some of these things so that you can be successful is so important now, more so now than absolutely ever, in my opinion. So there are things that you can do to structure yourself as well. Again, this is taken from a digital product mindset, but these sorts of things are just as easily adaptable to other situations. In the digital world, in the digital product space, this is a proven methodology on how to build great product. Simple diagram, but there's so much underneath this, it's not funny. I've actually just finished teaching this to the entire digital team at Woodside Petroleum in Perth. We spent about 8 weeks there on the ways of working between these potentially 4 groups, and I'll walk you through it just quickly. And this in particular also helps you to minimise political issues, minimise issues at work, and help you be more successful in the way you go about it. And what it is basically, we call this the golden triangle, 3-legged stool. There's so many variations of it. To build a great product, you need a product manager, you need a UX UI designer, this is in the digital space, and you need a strong engineering team. And those 3 cohorts need to wrap themselves around their customer or their user. So you have 4 actors in this particular situation. You still have your marketing, your sales, your HR, your legal that sit around this triangle. So there's a circle around the triangle that has to come into play. So for example, when I set this up at Australia Post, and I ran this experiment for 4 years with 160 people and 6 teams. So I failed a lot of the time at setting this up. I also got it right a few times. I also spent a lot of money doing it, but it wasn't mine, thankfully. But the learning was that you need to get this right, because if you have great engineers build products, they build a product that they gold plate, Rolls Royce, and I know there might be some engineers in the room, please don't throw anything at me, right? But I know how engineers think versus product people who think, I've got this great idea, but they've got no idea on how to build it. And the UX people who go, this is never going to work, it's not designed the right way. You need the rubbing and the scraping of the 3 cohorts with the customer at the center all the time to get the best outcome. Now, you can supplement that design for your own industry, but you can never have just one group of people designing a solution or an outcome or a service or a product. That's number 1. So collaboration and alignment between these people is critical, and therefore communication becomes absolutely paramount in how to get stuff done inside an organisation. Then there's one other trick. Everyone operates in, I'm from marketing, I'm from product, I'm from sales, I'm from HR. Then they get sent out to a project to work on the project, but their home team is legal, HR, and their away team is the project. What we did at Australia Post as part of an experiment is we flipped it completely. We got rid of we didn't get rid of the home team, but the home team became the project. So your project is your home team, your affinity is your home team, you leave your role at the door, you align yourself with your home team, they are your family, your away team is your line of sort of your chapter from where you come from, whether it's product or marketing or sales. So we flipped the model completely. It got rid of so much noise, so much politics, and so much just overall confusion, because what happens is is, as an example, is if you had the old structure and you're in product and there's an issue with the engineer, you escalate to your manager, that manager tends not to get along with the engineering manager, they have a punch on and nothing gets resolved, right? That happens a lot, especially as the organizations get bigger. Whereas this way, you're on the one team. So you're then trying to solve the problem as a group before you start escalating. Your affinity, where you feel you have loyalty to, completely changes. Is it perfect? No. Does it work exactly like I just said? No, it doesn't. Nothing's perfect. None of the stuff I've shown you today is perfect. They are models that have different degrees of variation in the way that they work. However, the chance of success, of being successful this way, is higher than the other way, in my opinion and in my experience. And so we really and as I said, I've just finished teaching this to the guys at Woodside, and there's a number of mining organisations that I consult to, and we try and help them with this, because most organisations, underneath this is documentation and ceremonies and ways of working and how do you communicate and all this sort of stuff. And the engineers and that in the room that come from this world would understand this, all the things that bubble out of this. And this is a lot of the stuff that we've been talking to Mossy about as well. And finally, a bit of body armour. So in an organisation, to get stuff done, and getting stuff done through people, you also need to be able to protect yourself to some extent, to remove assumptions and remove variability. And so the other learnings that we've had, and again, we ran this experiment for 4 years, and we now teach it, well-documented artefacts can be not underestimated. Making sure that things are well-documented, that change is documented. Managers change their minds all the time. Founders change their minds all the time. Mossy. So people change their minds all the time. So understanding and tracking that becomes absolutely critical, because you have something to reference back to, right? And so this is part about that body arm and saying, okay, we've made a change, let's understand why, let's document it so we can go back to it if there's a discrepancy, right? Having that as well done by your product engineering and UX team means they've got a united front on the documentation. It protects ambiguity down the track. Remember, in most parts where we're trying to build a product or a service, we're all about removing assumption, because assumption leads to variability and error, which leads to high cost. So the IAG group did a study across 100 companies. Companies that had great documentation going into delivery spent 50% less on the delivery. That's a big number, especially when you're dealing in delivery that's in the millions. As often we are, we're helping companies that are spending 10, 20, 30, $100 million transformations. That's a really important thing. Getting customer feedback to avoid the hippos. So hippos is the highest paid person's opinion, right? There's a lot of hippos, particularly in large organisations. They have an opinion. Ahmed said, we must do this. We used to have a thing called an ass, and Ahmed said so, right? And Ahmed said so's would trump logic, trump everything that we've just done, because he thought it was a good idea. He was a good guy, by the way, but he had a lot of asses. And so having customer feedback is probably the best weapon. I used to work for, in this particular case, the founder of Rolled, who's rolled out over 140 stores. And he had a particular view on an app that he was building. And we said, we don't think it's going to work. Don't take our word for it. Take your customer's word for it. So we tested it and it didn't work. He said, no worries. Right? So protecting yourself with customer feedback is the best thing that you can do in an organisation when you've got a hippo standing over your shoulder. Prototyping can never be underestimated, whether it's in the digital space or the not digital space. There's a lot of experimentation has to be done. So you fail in experimentation, you don't fail in delivery. Delivery is the most expensive place to fail. If you're building a house, you don't want to be changing the bathroom after the bricky's done the walls. You want to do it with the designer that's got it on a paper. It's no different in this world. So prototyping and clearly communicating requirements as well through those prototypes is essential. Again, we deal a lot with customers. We use prototypes to convey what the product is and going to be, because they can't visualize it if it's written. So we use a whole bunch of different artifacts to make sure they understand what they're getting, what needs to be built. It's part about eradicating assumptions. We've talked about strong documentation. We've talked about tracking changes. The other things that we do often, there's a bit of agile terminology in here. So every 2 weeks, when the team have done some work, we do a showcase. Hey, here's what we've worked on. Every other week we do a Gemba walk. Gemba work comes from the Toyota manufacturing system, and basically it means that the executive comes to where the work is done, And they sit with the team and they just simply understand what's going on. Why? Because we want to make sure our executives, our sponsors, and our hippos are well informed as to what we're doing so they don't have any surprises. So we use showcases and Gemba walks to remove those surprises, to remove assumptions so we can get stuff done, because this is how you need to understand how people work. And then having a well-documented ways of working, roles and responsibilities and glossary of terms is absolutely critical. The engagement that I had at Woodside, I wrote a dictionary for them on their terminology on how they talk to each other. So I often go into an organisation, and I just went into one yesterday. It was an insurance organisation. I spoke about product managers. And they said, "Can you please stop?" And I said, "No problem." And they said, "What's a product manager in your world?" So we went backwards. Product manager in their world was the people that look after the insurance products. Product manager in my world is the person that builds a digital asset that exposes those products to the rest of the world. And so that simple change changed the entire conversation for the rest of that hour. Woodside had to build a massive glossary of terms, so when they were talking to each other, they knew what they were saying. And this sounds funny, but it's not. Telstra's got a dictionary as well, right? Because language is so important. You need to understand how to communicate with the people that you need to so that you can get stuff done. And that's it from me.
We've got a couple of minutes for some questions. Has there anyone got any questions for Carl? Yes, Tab?
No. They could do with a lot of communication there, can't they? Yeah, they've had an interesting run. Interestingly, the same thing happened at Latitude, and the COO, which is a gentleman by the name of Andrew Walduck, was my old boss. And so, yeah, I had an interesting conversation with him as well. So, yeah, but no, I haven't.
John?
Firstly, that was fantastic. I think everyone needs to hear that. How do you manage staying authentic and also manage political aspects of the workplace?
It's really hard. It's really, really hard. Like, I think you got to. I think the first part is awareness. If you're aware that this is happening, your own personality will come out. What I find is that I feel sorry for the people that aren't aware. They're the ones that get their legs blown off. When the sands shift in an organisation, it happens all the time. They weren't aware, and this is look of bewilderment, right? So I feel sorry for them. But the ones that understand it, sometimes they're real assholes and pricks, right? And they use it in a manipulative fashion. And the balance here is really hard because, even presenting this sort of stuff, you don't want to come across as this dirty person that knows how to manipulate people, right? But I do. I do know how to manipulate people in an organisation. So how do I balance that with being good as opposed to being bad? At the same time, I have to do it to defend my people and my team. Really hard. I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to the question. So.
Yeah, so I feel like part of being a founder or a product manager is having a contrarian idea that 99% of people don't believe in, right? And you have to be right about the idea and you're not going to always be right about it. So how do you convey that message when you have an idea that everyone thinks is so hard to reach and like could not be successful?
Yeah, look, I used to get called at Australia Post the Red Cowboy, I think it was, right? And they used to say, "Oh, you're just full of confidence and you're just full of shit," right? And all my peers were against me and stuff like that. And what I learnt from that process was that they're all conforming to the norm, and I wasn't. I was trying not to. The only thing I can say is you have to have an amazingly thick skin, and that's where the resilience and the adaptability really does kick in. You have to believe in your cause and have the right amount of evidence to back it up. You have to have the alliances and the people that support you to back it up so that you can walk through a minefield, you don't blow your leg off, there is no sniper trying to take a shot at you, all of those sorts of things. So all of the stuff that I've just gone through are parts of how to deal with it. There's not one silver bullet, but the adaptability and resilience becomes absolutely critical because you are fighting against the tide.
Very good. We might finish there. So thank you, Carl. Here's a small token of appreciation, mate. Appreciate it. Everyone, and Carl. I'll just finish that bit off. I think probably the key that we've learned at UbiPark through our learnings with SixSix is around the customer and the focus around the customer. So I think if we kept building products the way we were building them in 2016, 2017, we would have a great app for a white male that's 52 and nothing else. No one else would have used it. So, and I think the other thing, I had a customer the other day, we were on a call, and it's around educating the customer around our product, so then they can make better decisions around how to use that product. And I think some of the way we collect requirements now and the questions we ask in our kick-off meetings is helping us actually get better solutions for our customers. And I think that's due to what we've learnt from SixSix. So thanks, Carl.